It's quite appropriate that Bill James is here in Ireland at a sports summit, because he talked yesterday to Simon Cooper about baseball being a perfect starting point for this kind of interest, because they had 100 years of stats readily available, collated by people who had a previous interest in cricket. Now, what maybe a lot of you don't know is that many of those early baseball players were Irish. Not second generation Irish, but first generation Irish. People like you and me who'd gone from Ireland, from Cork and from Clare. So Bill is also in the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame because of some of the work he's done. And I'd like to start with him with a quote from a recent piece he did with Joe Posnanski, the American sports writer, which says, well, it's about bullshit. It said, bullshit has tremendous advantages over knowledge. It can be created as needed, on demand, without limits. Is so much of the stats work that you see in the media and even within teams, is that just so much bullshit?
Well, the Posnanski is also Irish, by the way, I want to mention that. Just kidding. Statistics are just details, and they don't rise to the level of true bullshit. And true bullshit is general. Statistics are always specific. So a lot of it's useless, and it can be compared to bullshit in that sense, but I wouldn't say it rises to the level of true, genuine, authentic, bona fide BS.
When you see when you see writers using statistics as a crutch, or even people within clubs, you may have seen this in the past from personal experience, does it make you angry, sad? No, I mean, you spend a lot of your time in any field of knowledge, I think, filtering out stuff that's not useful and helpful. And I think by the time you get to be an adult, you probably have filters in place that you just I hardly even notice it, frankly. Sean, your company, we have entered an age of data everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's being generated in troves now. How do you know that the stuff you're generating is really useful? How is it making an impact?
Well, I suppose the quick answer is the client base, but that's not the right answer. It's a key part of tipping on the whole bullshit side of things, is that even with our system, there's endless amounts of data you can get from it, but it's been able to filter out what's real, what's applicable for you, what you need to use. But I mentioned the step balance, for example. In a recent example, we've seen a player pre-injury had a almost 50-50 balance from left and right foot. Injured his right ankle, coming back, telling the coach, I'm ready to play, I'm ready to get back into the team. Do some simple tests with him, some straight line runs, accelerations, decelerations, and his step balance is 60-40. So he's putting far more stress on the opposite side to try and counter for that injury. So there's real data in there, but it's been able to take what is applicable to you and take it and apply it and make use of it.
Are some teams and managers, coaches, are some better at asking good questions than others?
Yeah, you generally get a sense when you go into a team, those who ask a really good question straight away, and people will look to be seen to be doing the right thing. But it's like with any technology, it's only as good as the person on the end of it, or what we drive is, we have a software team to make it as user-friendly and as easy to get the right stuff out. But technology doesn't just work magic for you. You have to be able to take that data and make sense of it.
So all three of you in various forms will have had to be involved and make sure information like this gets into a team's decision-making process. If it doesn't get there, it doesn't get used. If it's not understood properly, then it's useless. Tony, you've probably been in a unique position now at Manchester United of going through a number of managers in a very short time. Alex Ferguson, David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, and now you've also had to work with the England national team. Could you give us some examples of the differences in approach you might have noticed between those management styles?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, Sir Alex Ferguson was probably, of his generation, was very much an intuitive-led coach. And that was born out of the fact that, you know, his long-term sustainability in the league. He knew the league. There are times when he would come in And he'd make bold assertions like, if we win today, we'll win the league, and invariably he was correct. Now, he had the capability and the capacity to know the league and know where to get the points from, and he would work that out, not so much in what you would call a classic statistical sense, but he would have a feel for what the requirements were to win the league. And in addition to that, when he blooded young players, he would make decisions that Ryan Giggs, for example, would need as an 18-year-old 25 to 30 games. So this whole concept about player burnout, you know, he wouldn't buy into that, and he would know the requirements of where they needed to be. Now, the next generation of practitioners that have come through the system, like myself, that have introduced the scientific stuff, we've got to try and sort of amalgamate that intuition with our insights, and all this really is about providing insights to the coach. He's in charge of the coaching process. Effectively, he drives that coaching process and he makes the decisions. The pressure's on him. So I think invariably, if I would have given a long report to Sir Alex in terms of data and stats, it would have still been on his desk 6 months later. So that wasn't the way to sell it to him. It was more graphical, more visual, and he would buy into that. And of course, as the process developed, what we tried to do in the back end of his tenure anyway was, you know, elongate the careers of Scholes, Giggs, Ferdinand, Vidic, and you know, keep them going. But of course, when somebody else comes in, a new manager comes in, it's about trusting the data and trusting the process. And that's why you've got to have 100% faith in what you collect. And that's why it's got to be gold standard, the technology's got to be spot on, and you've got to be comfortable with mitigating that risk and making them decisions. Not all coaches are like that. Fortunately, I think Louis van Gaal, again, he's from a generation, he has a physical education background, so he's more information driven. So it's less of a sell for us. I think I guess the challenge for us now at Manchester United is to supply and provide the relevant information to him that we've been collecting, and bring that together with the information he's had in the past. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because, you know, certain coaches will embrace the technology, certain coaches won't. So we have to find unique ways to sell it to them.
You mentioned intuition, and intuition, I suppose, is knowledge collected over time that the brain somehow creates a judgment, a gut call. As we move into, again, just further collection of data, I wonder, are we entering a world where if it can be measured, it's important? And if we can't measure it, maybe we're in danger of saying it's not important. Bill, I know in the world of baseball, the work of the catcher may have been undervalued in previous years, and in recent years, they've said, well, actually, no, the ability to catch and to fool the umpire almost into saying what is a ball and what is a strike is incredibly valuable. Right. Do you have a view on that's a gut feeling that maybe previous managers had? Is intuition valuable? Can that be?
Intuition is tremendously valuable, and we're never going to reach a point at which data answers all of the questions that intuition poses. On the specific issue of the catchers, there are many things like that people suggest are tremendously important, and a lot of them you look for and you look for and you look for, and you can't find the tremendous importance that is supposed to be there. What happened in that case is that people looked for it and found it. So then it came forward as something that was genuinely important because you could document that it does work, as opposed to, say, clutch performance. An ability to perform at key moments of the game, is a mythical beast that you can never document, but people still talk about it. You can't stop them from talking about it. But on the general issue of replacing intuition, the things that we don't know are still vastly larger than the things that we do know. So, for example, heading into a season, there are players achieve in a season about 50% of what they're capable of achieving. You have lots of players on your team who achieve 10% of what they're capable of achieving in a season, and a few players who achieve nearly 100% of what they might be capable of achieving. A good manager, if a good manager moves the center of that from 50% to 55%, that's much larger than anything that we can do by making the details larger. So making the details work better. So that there's still a much larger role for the intuition of a manager, I think, than there is for data which is detail driven.
So intuition we'll never get rid of. That is refreshing.
Right.
For those who might think that we're just creating automatons that run around without a brain. But you enter the realm of almost the psychological there. You know, the manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, I suppose, was also involved with the Ryder Cup team, getting inside their heads maybe. Can we measure psychology? Anybody?
Can I measure it? No. Someone may be able to measure it.
Well, I think over time, I think the next development in sports science will be, you know, identifying the tools to measure the key parameters. I mean, there are a number of things that you talk about psychology. Well, managing risk was one. Why did Man United, you know, outperform against a model in the last 10 minutes of games? Because it was a risk strategy. It was, you know, other teams would turn up to Old Trafford and they were risk averse. So they would sit back, Man United would pull on, hence the Fergie time that became quite popularised under Sir Alex. So risk, momentum, all these things that could be physical and or psychological, you know, are very, very critical in winning the league. So, but as Bill said, it's very difficult at this precise moment in time to measure them things.
And some which you go on to there is about the shape of the game itself. I mean, that could be soccer, it could be rugby, it could be NFL. The game changes over time. Sean, with the data you collect centrally, are you noticing changes in soccer or rugby in the way that the game is played?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the data we collect is backing up that there seems to be a big shift. I think even yesterday in a talk someone mentioned how in rugby, guys who were second rows, back rows are now centres, like 10 years ago it's moved on. So everything's getting bigger and stronger and faster. I think most team sports now are about explosive power, that ability to, regardless of a sport, if you can beat the person beside you over the first 4 or 5 yards, that burst of power and explosion, but being able to recreate that time and time again. It's all well and good being able to do it once and then dying away, but the game, most team sports are becoming bigger, physically stronger and athletic. Whether the element of skill has been lost in some of them or not, that's for a different debate, but it's definitely becoming a quicker, more powerful game.
Do you ever see a time when the amount of data that you actually collect can be released? One of the advantages that, Bill, you would have had way back when was that this data was essentially publicly available. On this side of the pond, we don't have that nicety when it's companies like, be it GPS providers or stats gatherers like Opta or Prozone. Do you see a time where maybe something could be done with, let's say, an entire league to say, here's the data, let's let the amateur stats man at it?
Well, that's something we're in. We've a couple of league organisations that we work with as opposed to the teams. In rugby, so the Irish lads will be wearing on Saturday our stuff. So in rugby it's easier because they're available or they're allowed to wear it in games at the moment. But we've been working with some of the top broadcasters to be able to show some of those stats. So the things we talked about in the first basic slide, distances, speeds, but even collisions in a tackle, a G-force. Like the clip there of Keane Healy, that hit, like that data, being able to transmit that to TVs, that's going to be close. Because that's something we're in talks with at the minute, because that just provides a better experience and puts us in touch with what's actually happening and making us aware. And the end users, the clients, the Tonys and that of this world, they're not losing anything by giving that information to the audience, because the key information like dynamic stress load and step balance and the load monitoring, that's not really been released. That's something that can be done without question.
Bill, just leading on from that, are we losing the realm of the amateur statsman?
If the people in this room were to organize themselves and collect data on something, they could do it far better than any company could do it. One of the central things in baseball, and I don't know whether you know much about baseball, but in the early 1980s, we went to the professionals who collected the official data, and we wanted access to more in-depth data about issues, and they told us for several years, no, this is our data, you can't get to it. And after several years of being told that, we said, okay, screw you guys. And we organized ourselves as fans to collect data. Well, within 5 years, we were way ahead of the data that we had as fans was way, way ahead of the data that the professionals had. I think that can be done in any sport. I think in any sport the fans are so much more numerous and so much more powerful that if they just organize themselves a little bit, they can collect data or collect anything to get far ahead of what and then you put the professionals in a position of playing catch up, which is what happened in baseball at least.
So they have to release stuff to look competent.
Yeah, right.
Actually,
Exactly.
noted. One of the areas where stats is moving into, and has moved into in the US, but I think we're moving that way here in rugby and soccer, is the use of stats in scouting. Pro zones certainly are making a concerted effort in this space. Stats versus scouts. Tony, in your work at United, can you ever take the scouting element of that, you know, knowing whether a player's body is projectable? What will they grow into it better? Will they become more powerful?
Yeah.
What's the mixture?
Yeah, I think again there's been a change in paradigm. I think now if you go to, I mean, I talk for our club in particular, we have 5 or 6 guys that are trawling through information and video clips, and it's the new breed of the scout. Our chief scout at Manchester United, Jim Lawler, has an IT background and a sports science background. He's also got a background in coaching in football, so he's got the nice blend of mix. I think again, whenever you're talking about player acquisition, you're always talking about potential, and I think that's always a difficult one to get around, because if a player's performing here and now, will he still be performing in 4 or 5 years' time? And then we have young players like Luke Shaw we took on last year, paid a lot of money for him, but we felt that, you know, for his age, that he would develop and demonstrate that potential, and I think, you know, that will be fed back. Now, there'll always be a human element to it, but I think what you've got now, you've not got, you know, that a bit like the Moneyball scene where you've got a number of scouts sitting around that, you know, sitting around a table talking about football. Now it's a different speak. It's about looking at information and data and blending the two together. So there has been a change in pace.
Is it true in football? In baseball, when players get to be 30 or 31 years old, they tend to sign 4-year contracts, which are almost always terrible contracts for the team, because the teams overestimate tremendously the likelihood that a 30 or 31-year-old player will continue to be successful over a 4-year period. Is that true in your sport as well?
Depends. I mean, each player is a life cycle, similar kind of thing.
Right.
You know, our most successful seasons when we had a squad between 22 and 26. So that's when they're in a prime, the high performance phase. However, you will get individuals, I mean, and that's the whole thing about data. Athletes like Ryan Giggs will buck the trend. He was still performing into 36, 37.
But I think we saw, Paul, was it Scholes and Giggs both signing single-year contracts?
Single-year contracts. I think that was. But I think that rather than a strategic plan from the club, it was more about, you know, they both trusted each other. But to take Bill's point, intuition will also let you down. You know, Sir Alex Ferguson himself said that he let Jaap Stam go too early, and he went on and it bit him in the backside. But I think there'll always be that human component. But to take your point, Bill, yeah, absolutely. We'll identify, you know, 28, 29 invariably to perform at the level we're expecting the guys. You're not going to get many players in the next 5, 10 years performing well into their 30s.
Just go back on your point about scouting, and obviously you will never replace that human element of it, but recently I was at a big basketball college in America, and they were flirting with trying to get some of these top athletes in to come to study and play in their basketball team. So a lot of those guys will have YouTube reels from their high school of, here's the best things I've done this year, here's all the goals I scored, baskets, here's the throws, touchdowns. Where this is going to go in the future is that if everybody's got, obviously I'd want it to be ours, but everyone's got this type of technology, you'll have your physiological fingerprint as well. So we can say, well, here's physically what I'm capable of. And then teams can compare that to, well, we've got a Wayne Rooney, but we've got a kid who plays in this position who's claiming to physically be at that level already. So that's given us another insight.
Okay, well, this screen is flashing at me, which I presume means something.
Shut up.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. I hope it's been entertaining. This has been a chat about the value of statistics in sport. Thank you, Sean O'Connor. Thank you, Tony Strudwick. And thank you, Bill James.
Thank you.